rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mrs. Brooks, roll call.
Yes. Brandon Coleman,
Present.
Susan Graves. Present. Ben Wakefield,
Present.
Mika Graham. She's out, but she is here. And Sherry K. Morgan. Present. Mike Hammond.
Present.
Present too.
Thank you so much. Board, we've been provided with a copy of an agenda for tonight's meeting. We have a motion to approve the agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comment or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And tonight's agenda has been adopted. Thank you. Moving on, we will suspend the regular board meeting and open the first preliminary determination hearing. The next item on the agenda is for the board to hold a preliminary hearing on the proposed project. If you're interested in speaking at the hearing, please make sure you have signed the sign-in sheet, which should include your name and address. After a presentation by the administration and its advisors, there will be an opportunity for the public to make comments about the project. At the hearing, we will ask that each person limit their comments to 3 minutes and that the topic be limited to the proposed project under consideration. The notice of this preliminary determination hearing was published as legally required. At this time, I will ask that Dr. Samuel explain the purpose of this hearing.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pursuant to Indiana Code 6-1.1-20-3.5, school corporation must hold 2 public hearings and adopt a resolution to preliminarily determine to issue bonds or issue release for a project which has a total project cost in excess of certain thresholds. These public hearings and the future consideration of resolutions are the very beginning of the legal process. I would note that no board action is legally required in this hearing. Rather, this hearing is solely to hear public comment regarding the project.
We will now hear from Dr. Samuel about the process of determining and communicating the project to the community and the need for the project.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I discussed during the project hearing last month, the goal of these projects is very straightforward. It is really all about providing maintenance on the investment that the board and our community have made in our facilities over the span of the next 10 years. As you've seen recently with our roofing projects and other maintenance, it is vital that we stay out front of these needs to maintain a healthy, vibrant learning environment. This authorization of $150 million will allow us to continue to make progress on our 25-year maintenance plan for vital facility components like HVAC and roofing over the next 10 years, along with investments in items like playgrounds and site work that create unsafe conditions when they begin to break down. As you're aware, the MSD in Wayne Township is heavily impacted by property tax caps. As a result, we've also utilized our debt service fund to reduce stress on our limited operations funds. This includes purchases vital to student learning and the daily functioning of our school district, like student devices and school buses. The authorization will allow us to continue to support these needs along with capital items for maintenance, IT, and transportation team.
Be worried on this.
I think to hear about the project needs that were just described. It's page 3, first one that says.
Yeah.
Okay. For additional reference, as of our last appraisal, we have
I'm gonna do this one. They'll come back up. There you go. We're just in a different order than you are.
Apologies.
We will now hear from Dr. Samuel about how the proposed project meets the needs as just described.
Thank you, Mr. President. We know the importance of providing a safe and comfortable learning environment for our students, as I mentioned above. Maintaining items like roofing to prevent leaks, HVAC equipment for climate controlled classrooms, safe playgrounds for physical development, safe buses for transportation to and from school, and student devices to access a 21st century education, come at an annual investment in MSD of Wayne Township facility.
We will now hear from Dr. Samuel about how the proposed project will be financed, as well as information about the effect on the typical property taxpayer.
Thank you once again, Mr. President. We have worked hard with our partners at Stifel to analyze this and are happy to report that the plan we have discussed for this authorization will not increase our annual debt service levy, meaning the impact on a typical taxpayer should be neutral from our current position till 2036, when our levy would begin to decrease. As noted, the anticipated hard and soft construction costs are $147 million, with cost of issuance and underwriter's discount coming in at $3 million to equal the total of $150 million. Our partners at Stifel estimate the interest rates will be between 2% and 6%, with estimates for principal and interest payments over the course of issuance at $263 million to $239,350.
We will now open the public hearing. Remember, if you would like to speak, please sign in on the sheet which is located on the table. As I mentioned earlier, we ask that you state your name and address. Limit your comments to the proposed project and financing. Keep any comments to 3 minutes and avoid being repetitive if possible. May I have the sign-in sheet now, and I will begin calling the names of those who are interested in speaking.
Mr. President, there was no one who signed up.
Thank you. No board action is legally required at this hearing. Rather, this hearing is solely to hear public comment. The board will continue to work with the administration and its professionals to look for efficiencies to conserve tax dollars while meeting our educational needs. The board will hold a second public hearing in this boardroom on August 11th, 2025 at 6:30 p.m. That closes our preliminary hearing, and we will resume our regular board meeting. Thank you, Dr. Samuel. Dr. Buster, do we have anyone seeking public comment in the regular meeting?
We did not, Mr. President.
Thank you. Moving on to minutes for approval. Board, you received a copy of meeting minutes from the June 2025 meetings. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes provided?
Make a motion, we approve the minutes that were provided.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any comment or discussion?
Mr. President, just for the record, this was the list for our record. Those minutes include the executive session from June 2nd, the regular board meeting from June 2nd, the executive session from June 16th, working session from June 16th, the special board meeting on June 24th, and the executive session on June 24th, all of 2025 being approved at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Butts. Any additional comment or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Thank you. Moving on to the financial report and docket. Dr. Samuel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, included in your documents for tonight's meeting, you'll find the claims docket totaling $66,852,654.14 for your review. This amount is elevated due to our semi-annual debt service payments, the inclusion of 3 payrolls, our continued heavy construction payments, along with some annual expenses for our child nutrition accounts, and also another kind of one that came in higher than normal was our self-insurance fund. Had a kind of a higher month on that front as well. leading to that number that is significantly higher than it typically is. I welcome any questions that you have and respectfully ask for approval of the financial report as presented.
I recommend approval of the financial report as presented.
We have a motion and a second. Any comment or discussion on the financial docket?
One thing I would like to say is I really appreciate having all the color coding for the various funds that were and expenses that were covered. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Sure.
Any additional comment or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Financial report is approved. Thank you, Dr. Sammy. Moving on to new business and human resources, Dr. Suggs.
You, Mr. President, members of the board, you received in board docs, the Human Resources Reports A1, A2, Addendum A1, and Addendum A2, and the Human Resources Report A2.1 have been made available for your review. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have and respectfully ask for approval of Human Resources Reports A1, A2, Addendum A1, Addendum A2, and Human Resources Report A2.1 as presented.
I move for approval. I move for approval of human resources reports A1, A2, A2.1 in their addendums.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any comment or discussion?
I find it very hard to vote for this. Interesting enough, I'm the only person sitting here that's had a chance to elect Dr. Butts. And it's been a very good 15-year period over that time. Things have gone very well. We've had our ups and we've had our downs. But overall, it's like anything else in life, it rolls right along pretty good and things have come together when they were supposed to in the right way. I told Mrs. Deckard that I was going to vote against you if you couldn't. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and vote. I want you to know it's with the deep sadness that I'm doing that. Not that I, don't want to go forward with other things, but it's with deep sadness, but with happiness too at the same time that I've had this opportunity to know you and to work with you. And I certainly appreciate what you've done for Wayne Township.
You like me enough to hire me twice. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you.
Yes.
Everything he said, I agree with.
It doesn't have to be unanimous vote. Nonetheless, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The Human Resources Report is approved. Thank you, Dr. Suggs.
Mr. President, members of the board.
Moving on to donations.
Mr. President, members of the board, I present the following donations for consideration. To Chapelwood Elementary, 500 from Gleaners Food Bank to purchase food for the pantry. Weekend meals valued at $2,880 from Kai Kai Omega. Soda, donuts, and bottled water valued at $500 from Simeon for teacher appreciation. The United States and Indiana flags valued at $100 from Chrismian. Clothing valued at $150 from Chapel Hill Lions Club. And then to Stoutfield, 3 skids of new books valued at $3,000 from Knights of Columbus. And supplies, including bottled water and food, valued at $695 for the Summer Uncle event. Mr. President, members of the board, respectfully, I request approval of these donations.
I move for approval of the donations to both Chapelwood Elementary and Stoutfield Elementary.
Second.
We have a motion and a second regarding the donations. Any comment or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Donations are approved. Thank you, Dr. Pierce. Moving on to field trips.
President, members of the board, I apologize on the forefront. I will ask for posthumous approval for 2 field trips on the secondary side. We let the month of June get a little bit away with us this summer, but Area 31 students requested to travel to Atlanta, Georgia to compete in Skills USA Nationals. And that competition was June 23rd through the 27th. And then the Ben Davis High School basketball program traveled to Sandusky, Ohio to participate in an NCAA certified live basketball tournament on June 26th and 27th. And coming up, we request approval for Chapel Hill 7th and 8th grade cheerleading team to attend the Universal Cheerleading Association Cheer Camp in Muncie, Indiana overnight from July 15th to the 18th. I respectfully request approval of our field trips.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second regarding the field trips. Any comment or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Field trips are approved. Thank you, Dr. Walters. Moving on to the 2025-2026 student handbooks.
Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Harris, Pierce, and myself present the student handbooks for 25-26 for our secondary, elementary and standard school. We respectfully request approval of our student handbooks.
I move for approval of the 2025-2026 elementary and secondary student handbooks. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any comment or discussion regarding the student handbooks? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The student handbooks are approved. Thank you, Dr. Walters, Pierce, and Harris.
Thank you.
Moving on to the 2025-2026 info guide, code of conduct, and annual notices.
Mr. President, members of the board, attached to the agenda is the draft 2025-2026 information guide, student code of conduct, and annual notices. Very few changes to the content have been made from last year's document. There have been some minor edits, spelling, grammatical corrections, wording dates, updates. This time, I'd like to draw your attention to some minor changes, including on page 1, the estimated superintendent message for the new school year. On page 2, there is an updated district map that reflects our new transportation this moment location, as well as the addition of a direct link to do interactive boundary maps for each school. On page 6, we page 2025-2026 school calendar. Page 7 includes added language for late start Mondays, as well as the Board of Education updated to the accessibility markup. Page 8 reflects updated language on how parents and guardians can turn and absence in Skyward, as well as the principal updates, including district and craft of the school year in 31, and Wayne Township preschool principal currently to be announced. There are also updated dates to end our grading period, as well as updated hours of operation to include late start mapping, start times, and centralized enrollment center hours from pages 9 to 10. On page 10 as well, our adult education program offerings have been updated that in such a way to reduce some of the content, just provide direct page. Page 12 includes some slight updates on how to enroll for kindergarten. Pages 15 and 16 have updated numbers for English learners, numbers and information, as well as some minor grammatical and spelling updates. There's also an update on page 17, updated language that calls after school should be made time, emergency calls should be placed in 911. Regarding the student code of conduct, there are no updates to that. And then in terms of annual notice, Attorney Carol Langwood with CPHA made minor grammatical updates, as well as necessary changes based on legislative updates in our state. On page 29, there's updated language regarding what should happen with unused medications and unclaimed. Page 30 has an updated responsible use of technology, internet use policy. Page 31 and page 32 note board policy references. Also, some updated Indiana code language our updated truancy prevention policy as language that defines truancy and the plan of action the schools are required to take by law. Page 33, is in the non-discrimination section, there's some updated language, to align with our board policy. 34, slightly updated language regarding possession of firearms. Page 35, some updated language on the laws regarding, the parents' right to define, their child's participation in instruction and rally. And, slight updates to language on this grade and conclusion, as well as, a requirement that, visitors must register at the school office and present ID on the street service. This document will be made available on our district website and sent through our district-wide transfer message to all families. I'm happy to answer any questions. And this time I respectfully request your approval of the 2025 information guides. We will go to prime.
Move that we accept the 2025-2026 information guide, code of conduct, annual notice.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any comment or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? And the 2025-2026 info guide, code of conduct, and annual notices are approved. Thank you, Ms. Temple. Moving on to board reports, I read 3 update.
Thank you, Mr. President. Attached, you have hot off the presses, our IREAD 3 data. It is still embargoed data for sharing externally, but we can share this information internally. If you take a look at the first slide there in your board documents, you can see our grade 3 data from IREAD. Our total pass percentage this year was 74%. That is up 8% from last year. This has been a big initiative for us. We've been working very hard on literacy. To provide some context, we do not have all of the Indiana state data for this year yet, but I've listed there for you that Indiana did see the highest increase year over year last year since IREAD's inception in 2012, and that increase was 0.6%. So there was a lot of positive publicity over that increase. Also, the state literacy cadre schools saw significantly higher growth at 2.5% last year, with the non-cadre schools averaging a 0.2% increase. So that just helps us put into perspective a little bit how large that 8% growth was for us this year. So wanted to share that good news with you tonight.
Thank you very much. Wow. Do we have any sense yet of the summer school program and what our success rate might be after that?
Yeah, so this data, if you take a look at the column, you'll see a column that says May pass and then June pass. And so this spring was how many students had passed at that March administration. And as a district, we were at 62%. And then we were able to give the assessment again, right at the end of the year, just before summer school. And of the students who retook it, 22% of those students passed. And then when we went into summer school, after summer school, the June administration, 17% of students passed. And then that got us to our total of 74%. The second page there too just shows you school to school. It's the same information on that first sheet, but it's just blown up to be a little bit larger. But you can see we had some schools with really significant growth. I mean, Bridgeport specifically increased 16% over last year. We had many schools make it over that 70% mark, and we had, I believe, 3 of our schools that are over 80% of students passing. And then if we want to take a look at second grade too, because now you may recall all of our second graders are taking IREAD 3. It's the same test, and if they pass in second grade, they don't have to retake it in third grade. Last year was the first year we did that, and last year we had 28% of our second graders who passed. This year we had 40% of our second graders pass.
So our incoming third graders for this year, we already have 40% who have passed that test.
That's really remarkable.
My question would be looking at, so in this world, the retention, and what does that look like, what would that look like for staffing? Depending on the amount of third graders I see, for example, with like Chapel Glen might have 17. What would that look like staffing wise for certain buildings?
Yeah, so very good question. That fourth page there shows the retentions by school. So we are still looking at about 100 students that we will be retaining. So those are students who did not pass IRE 3 and they don't qualify for a good cause exemption. So these are the students that by state law have to be retained. And it's anywhere from 0 students to 17 students. When we did our staffing projections, I looked with each of the principals and we looked at third and fourth graders combined and what number of teachers we would need there. And so when you look at a school like Chapel Glen, having 17 students that are going to be retained, that does mean we're going to need more staffing in third grade, but it means we're going to need a little less staffing in fourth grade. So the result of those retentions, we won't need any additional teachers, but we will have to make some shifts in where teachers are placed and which grade levels they're in.
So when I'm looking at 0 retention, that's because the good cause exemptions for those who did not pass.
That's true.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So even though that percentage may not be where you want it, it's really a lot better than what it looks because all of the students have a good cause exemption for that. So it's almost like 100%. Yes.
Well, so the exemptions give an exemption from being retained, but not an exemption from needing to pass the test. And so where we've got 74% of kids passing, we know then that 26% of our kids still didn't pass, but it could be in certain schools that all of the children that didn't pass qualify for a good cause exemption. They're moving on to fourth grade, but they will continue to take that test. They'll take the test again in fourth grade. If they don't pass, they'll take it all the way through the end of sixth grade, but they won't have to be retained in third grade. They'll be promoted to the next grade level.
But so once you get that good cause exemption, most likely you're going to maintain that year after year. If they don't pass it, they're going to keep going forward.
Yes.
Okay.
But do you know the WIDA level?
Now, so there's 5 ways that students get good cause exemptions. So a student with an IEP is eligible for a good cause exemption. It's the determination of the case conference committee. So they take a look at that, determine if the child qualifies, and that's written into their IEP. For our language learners, it can be written into the ILP, and that is just for students who have received 2 or fewer years of instruction in English and Indian. And so not all of our elementary students qualify for an exemption, but many of our students do.
Do they have to be a level 1 or level 2, or is it just the 2 years of
It's
instruction?
just based on the 2 years of
Okay,
instruction.
gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
A third way that students may get an exemption is if they've already been retained in third grade. And so then they can be granted an exemption and not have to take third grade for the 3rd time. The other way is if they've been retained in kindergarten, 1st or 2nd grade twice previously. And then the 5th way is if they pass the math I-Learn assessment. So they may not have passed the IRE, but if they pass math I-Learn, they can be promoted to 4th grade with that good cause exemption. So we did, you may recall when Mr. Marcotte did the presentation, we did learn that those are the 5 categories for exemption. But there was another law passed that says if you have 50% or more of your students in 3rd grade are language learners, then you can give a good cause exemption to all of your LAP students. Basically, the determination still has to be made by that ILP committee, but they are eligible. And so at Westlake and at Garden City, we are over 50% English learners. And so they have that additional category of exemption. Right. Any other questions or comments?
In the right direction. I think, and it's really important here that we recognize Heather for the work that she has done with her building leaders and with the staff at the elementaries. You might recall that Heather walked everybody through a action research project last summer focused on literacy in each one of these buildings. And so this truly is the payoff and the result of the work that began over a year ago, working with the building leaders in their schools to be very intentional of having a literacy focus. So kudos to Heather and her leadership with her building leaders and her classroom leaders and the reading specialists and everyone involved. There's lots of hands in this, but need to really mention that Heather's leadership with the action research is directly the result of why these scores are so high.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It truly has been everyone, all hands on deck, sure, and everything.
Yeah.
Principals of Leadwell, teacher support tar.
It was interesting going to all of the buildings for the site visits, and then talking about it and seeing it. It's like it all came together. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great work. Moving on to the policy analytics presentation.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my pleasure to introduce Jane Herndon from Policy Analytics. You may recognize the name in the face. In her previous life, she also supported MSD Wayne Township as counsel at Ice Miller on some of our bond issuances over the years. A few things to just point you to within this presentation, that this is a huge bill with lots of detail and lots of complicating factors. I was talking with James before the meeting, and it impacts everyone across the state in different ways. Certainly impacts us here in Wayne Township. I point you to, as she works through, the impact that it's going to have on multiple funds. It's going to impact our debt service fund. It's going to impact our operations fund. It's going to impact our referendum fund. So it's not just in one place, and underneath those different funds, there are some unique factors in each of those as well. So we will spend quite a bit of time, our budget presentation at our next working session. It's going to look different than it has over the last few years, so that we can really spend some time talking through in more detail the Wayne Township impact of SCA1 and what that looks like moving forward. Beyond that, I think the other key factor that she will reference is it really does push us to shift from a rate-driven strategy that we've utilized for quite a while here in Wayne Township to a levy-based strategy when we think about debt service for sure, but really there's some components of the bill for operations that will eventually force the board potentially to take action if our operations levy were to increase year over year as well. So lots to unpack. Today is the first slice of that, and we're so fortunate to have Jane here to help us out.
That Mike will understand. Mike will get the irony of this, but part of what we used to be a levy-based system, levy-driven system. That's where we end up with the $4 million that we were getting, which wasn't nearly enough to hit that threshold of maintaining our building. That's when we went to a rate-driven system. And now with the new language, we find this to be more advantageous to go back to a levy-based system. So it's really interesting in how that, and Jane has lived it all. On the bond side, but yeah, so Jane, so glad you're here with us. Thanks.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate being here tonight, and it's nice to hear such good news before this presentation. Thank you. I always learn things when I come to Wayne. So it's very interesting, so I appreciate it very much. As you heard, please stop me as we go. I want this to be helpful to you and meet you where you are. There's a lot of information in this. And if you're like most of us, you might need to hear pieces of this multiple times. It's pretty complicated. So with that, I'm going to go forward. All right. Okay. Oh, good, it's not operating.
I have to escape and start over.
Okay, that I can do. Done. Thank you. So we're going to talk about the impact on the tax rate. A little peek behind the curtain here. All tax rates are going up. The county, city, schools across the state, we are seeing tax rates increase. We'll also. Perfect, thank you. We're also going to talk about revenue and levy. How much can you actually collect? And we're used to thinking about tax rates go up, revenue goes up. We have to decouple that concept for a while when we talk about Senate Bill 1. And then we'll also talk about the impact on the taxpayer. So with that, I want to remind people about algebra. We have net assessed value, that's the pie that you tax. The tax rate that you apply to the assessed value gives you your revenue. You've been in a place for several years, like many school corporations, where you had increasing assessed value. That allowed you to keep your tax rate steady and raise more revenue. That's not the case with Senate Bill 1. The pie is shrinking. The assessed value is actually reducing. So in order to get the same amount of revenue, tax rate goes up. So that's why those tax rates are going up, because the pie that you are taxing is shrinking. How did Senate Bill 1 reduce your assessed value? The first thing they did is they provided additional homestead deductions to homeowners. And you can see on the far right column there, the supplemental deduction is going to increase every year for the next 6 years until it's fully implemented in 2031 at 66.7%. What does that mean? That means the home value is locked off, 2/3 of it comes off before the tax rate applies. So you're only going to be taxing 1/3 of the value of each one of the homes in your school corporation. So that's one way the pie is shrinking. What else did the General Assembly do? Near the end of the session, there was concern that that was not going to be enough relief for taxpayers. So they added in a new kind of homestead credit. I sometimes call this the $300 10% credit, because we don't really have a good name for it. But it is the lesser of 10% of a taxpayer's liability, or $300. And it comes in after the tax cap. So let me give you an example. And I'm using this just because the math is easy. You had a $300,000 home. It hits the 1% constitutional tax cap, which didn't change. The bill would be $3,000. Now they get an additional $300 credit. So now their bill drops down to $2,700. That's good for taxpayer, but that's loss to the school, the county, the library, etc. Right? And it's coming in after the tax. And it's 10%. So if your home was less than $300, you're not going to get the full $300. You might get $200 or $100, depending on the value of your home. It's a lesser of 10% of $300.
And that's after deductions, correct?
After
So your
deductions,
standard.
After
All
deductions.
those deductions, so
correct.
even if your values are 300, if your taxable assessed valuation is 250. And that's without referendum, correct? That's just,
Yes.
just another
Referendum
county.
gets added at.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay, so that's another way that pie is shrinking. What do they do for the 2% property? So constitutional capped 2% properties are apartments, so non-homestead residential, long-term care, and ag. For the first time, they've provided deductions to those types of taxpayers. So they right now are fully taxed on the value of their property. Now going forward, they will have a deduction that grows each year, as you can see on the chart here, until it gets to 2031 at 33.3%. So basically 1/3 of the value comes off in a deduction before you actually apply the tax rate. How about business? There was a lot of talk about this during the session. They did not exempt all business personal property. And a reminder, business personal property are things like computers, furniture, fixture, equipment, machinery that businesses use to generate business income. They did, however, raise the exemption. So right now, if you were a taxpayer in Marion County, if you had $80,000 or less of value in business personal property, you're exempt from taxation. They raised that to $2 million. And our report is identifying Wayne Township parcels that have $2 million or more of business personal property, and we are taking them off the rolls beginning in 2027. You'll see that in your data. They also did something else that is not in the report at this time, but it will be going forward, and it's new property, new business personal property that puts placed in service this year will not have a 30% floor anymore. So what that means is in business personal property, the value decreases every year based on your depreciation. Currently, when you get to 30%, it stops and it just stays there at that value that you're taxing. Going forward, it will continue to depreciate. So right now, it's not in what you're going to see as far as numbers, but eventually we'll watch this going forward to see how it affects business. Just a quick reminder that you've heard about this from your bond folks and from Dr. Salmon. The 80 cents used to be the debt service tax rate that required you to go to referendum. They now lowered that to 70 cents. So let's look at Wayne Township and your makeup of your assessed value. So this is the value of the different types of taxpayers in your school corporation. You see the far left, 2025, you're about 48% residential. You do have 16.5% business personal property that we were just talking about. Industrial, commercial are strong, and then you do have apartments. Let's flip over to the far right-hand side, 2031. The reason we picked that year is because that's when all those deductions are fully implemented. At that point, your residential portion of your mix will drop down just a little bit. You can see your business personal property drop down some. What that says to me is you actually have quite a few taxpayers of business personal property that are above that 2 million. Because it reduced, but it didn't go away. So for you, we may need to watch this going forward to see how that 30% floor affects you. But it looks like you have some taxpayers that actually have more than the 2 million.
Is Jane, am I correct that those businesses, there is a workaround if they choose to reconstitute and then realize the opportunity to go below the 30% floor all the way to zero?
So absolutely, could be, to your point, they replace equipment that they already have.
Or let's say
Or
hypothetically, Ecobat just changed their name again.
Sure.
It's the third time in a year that they've reconstituted they were for Ecobat. They're now anyway, they're now a third entity.
It'd have to be a different entity, but yes, I think that is very possible.
Medco went to something else too, right? So we've had a few of those kinds of things happen in the last year.
And what it's by county also. So you think about that, does somebody move some of their business personal property over the county line? So 2 million of it's in Marion County and 2 million of it's in Hendricks County. You know, what incentive this will end up creating, I think is unknown at this point, but this is one of the things we're going to need to watch going forward, the business, because you have a pretty nice chunk of business person. So you see your industrial increased a little bit, your apartments decreased a little bit. And that's because they have deductions now. Before they didn't have deductions. By 2031, remember, a third of that property has come off the rolls.
Jane, what's the difference between the personal business property and industrial? Like, what are some of the examples of business?
Yeah, the industrial, what we're talking about there is real property. So it's the land, it's the buildings, it's that kind of stuff. The business personal is fixtures, the equipment, it's not inventory.
Think about all the industry, all the machinery inside of carrier.
Correct.
So are they tax both, or they get to decide they're one thing? I mean, how
They
do?
pay both, so they pay their,
both.
they
Okay.
pay their property tax
Okay.
on their buildings and their land. And then they have a tax on all the equipment inside,
Okay.
and that depreciates to 30%.
Gotcha.
The new law says that can depreciate down to 0. So Amazon just retrofit their entire facility to do a different type of processing. Or for instance, Target, which is one of the only warehouses that also does home delivery as well as their warehousing here in Wayne Township. So they retooled a whole section of that warehouse a couple of years ago. If they were to do that again, well, that's not a good example there necessarily, but if they were to reconstitute and become another entity, they could possibly realize that existing equipment down to 0.
But an organization typically pays both. Those, the industrial and. township.
Yeah.
Yeah, we probably have.
So Amazon would be the industrial stuff, inside of it would be the personal.
That's correct.
Based on Dr. Butz's example, every time someone like Amazon wants to retool inside, whose door they're gonna go knocking on to get an exemption? And we're left hanging because they can get rid of it, and in fact, we've made a decision on some particular item we need to have rebuilt in Wayne Township, and we're basing that levy again to get that job done. Where do we go from there? And maybe I'm looking at,
Well, this
Kind
would
of
make me
guy.
probably a little more nervous is that this business personal property is forms that the taxpayer pay or files. So unlike real property that's assessed or based on cost tables, this business personal property is actually self-reporting. I assume there's an audited process, but honestly, you're outside of my expertise. But, so yeah, it's something we're gonna wanna watch going forward. Absolutely. So the next slide is who pays as compared to one another. So now we've added in circuit breaker caps and that 300 new supplemental cap. And you can see your residential stayed strong. Your business personal has come down a little bit. Your apartments are pretty strong. And it's interesting how this shakes out because in some ways, the General Assembly put a lot of different taxpayers benefiting from this bill. It almost feels like, let's try this, let's try that. And it's hard, every school corporation is different. And how those changes affects the district is really different from district to district because that so many changes happen at one time. So let's look a little bit more. We're going to look at 2 scenarios for you tonight. The first one is keeping your debt levy the same. So just assuming you're going to ask for the same amount of money in your debt fund every single year for the next 10 years, what does Senate Bill 1 do to your other funds as far as how much money you can collect? What does it do to your tax rate, et cetera? Then the other scenario we're going to look at is one in which you are receiving a little bit more money in your debt fund each year. And we're calling it a rate scenario. And it basically was the amount of money that you would have collected in your debt fund if you had kept the rate steady before Senate bill. So here's the easy way in my mind. One is the levy, same amount. The other one, you get a little bit more money in your debt fund. And we're just going to run those 2 as kind of bookends to see what Senate Bill 1 does. So this is Wayne Township's gross assessed value in green. So this is before the deductions are applied. You can see you've had some nice growth really beginning in 21, 22. And then you can see that growth continues. There's a little bit of a flattening or reduction in 2027. That's when the business personal property exemption kicks in. Comes out of your gross because it's an exemption, but then it continues to increase. Why is that increasing? Because the assessment system didn't change. Our values and the assessments that are made are still made that are based on market. So to the extent home values continue to go up, business values go up, gross assessed value will continue to increase. The blue line is where you would have been before Senate Bill 1. And we are assuming a 2 to 4% increase each year on average in your assessed value prior to Senate Bill 1. The orange line is what happens when we add those deductions in that we were talking about, that shrinking of the pie. And you can see that it really reduces or flattens down until you get to 2030. 2031, remember, all the deductions are fully implemented, and then you start getting a little growth again. So to Dr. Samuel's point, it could be you manage to your levy for the next 6 years, and perhaps in 2031, 32, you look at the possibility of managing back to the rate, perhaps. So you're not necessarily going to have to take this approach forever. It's like everything else, times change and you may take a different strategy. 2026 is probably pretty conservative in this report. We are starting to get information about what 2026 assessed value is going to be. And due to a couple things, one is home values have continued to increase. So we think 2026 is going to stay strong in the home area. And commercial and industrial are set on cost tables put out by the state. Those haven't been adjusted until since prior to COVID. They adjusted them this year. So the good news, if there's any good news, is 2026 NAV is probably going to be higher than what we're showing here. After that, the trajectory should be similar, but hopefully we'll have a little bit better news in August when you actually receive next year's assessment. You'll see that in 2027, it's a little bit flat. There's really not a dip there. That's that airport tip rolling off. So that helped you, that kept that up a little bit higher than you otherwise would.
So before we glance over that, we know that the airport has already begun to publicly discuss a new tip for the hotel that's being built. So that will be at the current tax rates, not at the 1991 tax rates when the initial tip was approved for the United Maintenance Facility. When the General Assembly voted to end that tip in 2025 and be able 27, is that right? Yeah. We had expected at that time to see about an 8%, 7 to 8% increase in our AV.
Yeah.
Until the growth quotient entered in, and now we're capped at how much we can grow. So because of the enormous growth in the assessed valuation across the state of Indiana, the General Assembly put in a cap on how much growth you can have each year. So the taxpayer is not seeing a 10 to 12% increase every year. What their AV is then reflected in their taxes. So now it's capped at 4%. Now it's capped at 4%. So we will not realize that full increase in AV from the airport because we can't grow any more than 4% a year over a 3-year. Right.
They're getting ready to change hunts.
Yeah. So where we thought we might see a little bit of a windfall in 27 from the increase in tax revenue due to the airport TIF, clearly we're not. But it is, to James' point, we're not seeing a dip either. So
we gotta find.
right, I know. If you want to see something positive, there's a positive there. So
So now let's look at, so we have that pie that's really shrinking or staying steady. And what does that do to your overall tax rate? And this includes your referendum rate. You see in 2025, it was $1.94. And let's just look at the solid red line. That is that flat debt levy. So you're not asking for any more dollars in debt. The tax rate will go up 26 cents until 2031. It's $2.20 basically. The state average increase for schools, we just did this calculation in the last couple of weeks, is about 35 cents across the state. I've seen them as high as 65-cent increase, same levy, and as low, I think, as maybe 20 cents. So you're on the lower side of pain, I guess. Let's look at the debt rate. So digging down a little bit deeper into this. This is your debt rate. You were working at that dollar debt service rate. And you can see that grows to, again, let's focus on the red line. That's the flat levy, a dollar and a nickel. So about 5.5 cent increase over that time period. That one would still, you're above the 70 cents. If you remember, that 70 cents forces you to put all debt, regardless of the size of the project, on a referendum ballot. That's probably one reason that you're going through that public hearing process to try to see if you can get some authorization grandfathered so that you could continue, if you needed some additional debt, you would be able to issue that even though you were over the 70. I'm going to talk about lit or
Yeah, so Mike was asking processes that we've kind of been talking about. The way the mechanisms work currently, in the current state of affairs, MSD of Wayne Township would not be able to borrow any money until 2036. So if you think about the next 10 years, let's use Garden City as a great example, right? So we have this issue where we have 40 classrooms that need drywall in 2 weeks in order for us to be able to open up. We would not be able to do an emergency project like that because we would not have the opportunity to borrow. Even though we know that insurance is coming in, but that project we had to move forward on in order to be able to open up school in 2 weeks. And so that and the roofs and the parking lots and the mechanicals and all of the things that we have on our preventive maintenance plan would not be able to be accomplished until 2036. So in essence, as we talk a lot about the investment that we're making in facilities that our community has invested in, we would not be able to maintain and keep those facilities up. It's a reason why we have not built a building for 21 years until we built transportation. So it's a reason that, Ben Davis University High School is now, I don't know how old, 100,
Building.
the building itself go back to, the 30s and 40s of 1930s and 40s when that building was originally built for Ben Davis High School.
Being 100 years, but yeah.
So almost 100 years old. So the only reason we're able to do those kinds of things is because we keep them up, right? We invest that 20% that we're supposed to invest back into our buildings every year. So anyway, this is not done moving. We know that this will continue to evolve in upcoming sessions. But in the current state of affairs, the way that it's currently laid out, 2036 would be the first opportunity that we would have to borrow to get below that 40 cents. So the way our debt is structured.
the Senate Bill 1 also affected local income tax. They redid the lit or local income tax system. And all of the agreements on how lit is currently being used are ended. And Marion County spends about $11 million each year in something called property tax replacement. And it's something that you probably don't see. It gets added into your homeowner's bill. So all the units put their tax rate together, those deductions we talked about all get applied. And then before the tax bill itself is arrived at, the county takes some of these lit income tax dollars and applies the credit. So it softens the impact to the taxpayer. That is going away. And due to that, then, you'll see here, this is the district's net levy in ops. So in other words, this is the amount you actually collect in your operations fund after circuit breaker loss. You can see 2025 and the dotted line is where we would have projected you to be before Senate Bill 1. And you can see the solid line is the projected after Senate Bill 1. You have a little bump in 2027 due to the airport tip. But then, as I was just describing, that PTRC coming off, not being available to help the taxpayer, that means more taxpayers hitting the cap and hitting the cap by greater amounts. So that means you're collecting less in your operations fund. And again, the red side is the levy side. You can see if you were to manage to the rate, what happens is you end up going negative in your ops fund.
So think about also, every year, we transfer just under 15% from our education fund into our operations fund to allow us to continue to be able to pay the bills, right? And you might also remember anybody who's considered non-educational, most people in this building are now paid out of operations because we're not directly tied. Now, some of us are, but there's many employees here that are not, so they have to be paid out of the operational fund. So that reduction of almost $6 million, clearly our strategy will be to continue as long as we're allowed to transfer that money from the education fund over into the operations fund so that we continue to operate. But we also will have to look at other ways that potentially, and we've done some of this, that those funds we currently pay for out of operations may have to come out of another fund, maybe even referendum fund, or if there's other things that we could put into bond issues, then we will.
Now the referendum. So the referendum, if you recall, is you lock in a tax rate. So 35 cents in 2025. And for several years, you were actually collecting more money in that fund over time. That was good because your expenses, as you know, were increasing. The General Assembly changed that with the pie shrinking. So if you have the same rate and you have a smaller pie, that means you're collecting less revenue. And you can see that here going from 16, a little over 16 in 2025 to 2031 at the port would be 14 million. Now, as you see, the last year of your referendums in 2027, I will mention that all schools with operating referendum are facing this same problem, less revenue in these funds. And districts, there are several districts that are going in to either renew or hold a new referendum in November. Those that are renewing, many of them, after they look at this information and also calculate the increasing costs in the referendum fund, are looking at something that has a higher tax rate potentially in it. So that's a conversation I'm sure the board and the community will be having, but this is a challenge when it comes to your operational levy. We talked a little bit about this new 300 or 10% additional circuit breaker loss. And it acts different than traditional circuit breaker. Traditional circuit breaker loss comes out of your operations fund, unless you had a waiver. So all the loss comes out of ops historically. This part of the statute is written differently. And the loss is spread out between your ops fund in blue and your orange is debt. The problem is you have to collect enough money in order to pay the principal and interest to your bondholders. So a couple things can happen here. The first is you have a balance in your debt fund called an operating balance. And for a while, you can use that to offset the circuit breaker loss in debt. Eventually, that money will be gone. And so effectively, this barber pole starts to look like it's all blue because you're going to end up having to take those loss in your operations fund. The other reason why you might have to take this loss all out of your operations fund is because Standard & Poor's, the rating agency, it's possible that they will come back and tell the state that unless you protect debt, unless you make sure units of government can collect all the money they need to pay bondholders, we are going to downgrade units of government. That happened, if you remember, the first time around. I see Mike going, yes. First time around, when we got circuit breaker tax caps in, that's exactly what happened. The state came back and said, nope, all the loss has to be out of here. So what that means though, is that this entire poll there, in 2027, instead of 540,000 having to loss come out of your ops fund, you're looking at $1.3 million having to come out of your operations fund as loss, or not collecting that money. This is what I would describe. We thought we probably need to then add, we had operations levy we showed you. We showed you the operating referendum. And now we said this debt, $300 credit for debt is probably going to have to come out of operations. So that's what this is modeling. That's that rust colored line. So now you see that compared to 2025, the 20 million you're collecting a little over 18. So 6 years from now, you're collecting less than what you're collecting in 25. So let's talk about the impact on the taxpayer. This is a taxpayer who lives in your Wayne Township taxing district. This taxing district makes up about 74% of your tax base. The person living in that district in 2025 had a total tax rate of something like $3.87. That's the county rate, the library rate, the school rate, everybody all together, all units added up to $3.87. That says to us that probably that median homeowner, for you, that median homeowner is about $192,000 home, is at the tax cap. They aren't paying more than 1% of their value plus the referendum. So you see in 2025, their total bill was $2,234. And after Senate Bill 1 and that 10% credit, it drops down to $2,110. So $124 savings compared to what they had in 2025. So one thing that people sometimes say is, how can that be? We just went through all this. Where's the beef? Where's the money? Remember, this bill wasn't only about homeowners. Remember, the business personal property got help. The apartments got additional deductions. So there are all different, the lit, PTRC went away. So there were all these different pushes and pulls that worked against each other. The other thing that's not on this chart is where this taxpayer would have been if Senate Bill 1 didn't happen. So it's possible their liability would have grown at a steeper rate than what this is showing, for example. One other thing to remember though, we are assuming on this 25 to 26 home that they are growing maybe 3% on this chart. To the extent that their assessed value in 26 went up higher, is going up higher than that, it's possible that their bill will be the same or even higher than it was in 2025. Not because anything you did, but because the home value, the home market has continued to be strong. And so the bill increases. So this is going to be a little bit difficult if you think about it from the General Assembly's perspective, because there's expectation that we're going to have historic tax relief. And so I think many homeowners are expecting to have a lot lower bill next year. It'll, as Dr. Butt said, the General Assembly's not done. What we don't know is how the General Assembly will react to this kind of that it could be these people are not getting the lower bills than they think.
And the governor, you know, this was the governor's campaign in Providence. And there was a lot of people not very happy at the end of the session because nobody was a big winner in this session, the way that they thought they were gonna be with tax relief. And so, so I think there's gonna be some pressure also from the governor's office as well as from Speaker and the Senate Pro Tem.
Your administration asked us to model a little bit more. So we were, as we talked about, we were talking about asking for the same amount of money in debt. They came back and said, you know what, could you run for us less money in the debt levy? Will you run a 40 million? So your current debt levy was 42, almost 43 million. Will you run a 40 million debt levy? And will you run a 35 million? So lowering amount of money that you asked for. And you can see here, that's the red is the debt levy scenario we've been talking about. The purple is asking for 40 million, so a little bit less. And then the green is asking for 35 million, a little bit less than that. And you can see what that does to your overall tax rate. With regard to the green option, it gets you down to an increase of 6.5 cents by 2031 instead of 26 cents. So it does help that tax rate increase that we've been looking at. What about the debt rate? What do those options do to the debt rate? And you can see again, comparing the red at the level debt you're at this year, the 40 million, and then 35 million is your green. And your purple there is just 1 cent less than what your 2025 rate is. And the 35 million is about 13.5 cents less in the debt fund. Looked at those options going forward.
Jane, if I could.
Yes.
Just one moment. One thing to remember on the rate here and then the levy on the next slide is we're paying on 20 years worth of debt. So the 35 million is already going to be paying debt that we've issued long in arrears. So there's some real strategy involved in this part of it, but that's an important piece to remember is we can't impact the majority of that number because it already exists and we have to make those payments.
And as you just heard, then we also took those same scenarios and looked at the operations net levy. How much could you collect in your ops fund if you looked at some of these scenarios or options? And you can see, you know, the 35 debt levy gets you an additional 5 million, 5 million 3. The 40 million gets you an additional 2 million 4, and then in the debt flat gives you $800,000 more than 2025. We added in that look at the operating referendum, and that debt circuit breaker loss that has to come out of ops. We modeled that, so you can see that difference as well. And then the total net levy on all funds, how much you actually collect each year. This is then what those options would look like. So these are just 3 options. It could be that the board and administration, as you discuss it, you come up with some different scenarios, but this is just different data points and trying to help you strategize. What do you want to maximize? Where do you get the most bang for your buck? So you have the dollars you need to educate your students. And just a reminder, this is kind of a summary of all those changes that came in at one time. And that's one reason why it's not just helping the taxpayer homestead, it's affecting a lot of different types of taxpayers. Thanks, Steve. Unless you want me to, I wasn't gonna go into any of the items. I can't see your face.
No, I think
Okay.
that's great.
Do you have questions? I know it's a lot of data and information.
Do they understand the convoluted way that they've done this? And I know that's a bad question.
They had a lot of information from LSA. And LSA has very good data they use, but it doesn't put into the model each unit's actual debt claim, for example.
Okay.
It uses, in many cases, older assessed value. So I think the answer is probably 90% of the people who ended up having to vote for this or higher really probably didn't know. I mean, when you try to throw a lot of things at a problem, it's sometimes hard to know how it's gonna come out. And they've said, this isn't done. I think they're gonna look at it and now, does it get better or worse that you're?
Well, because I mean, have the choice but to look at it, because it is, a lot of people are gonna come to the table and begin to ask questions that they haven't had the opportunity. Now they've had a chance to see it, like you explaining it to us. Not that I understand everything about it, but there's a lot of folks out there, probably in business, individual businessman who's not tied to a corporation or whatever, is gonna have a hard time figuring this out. He's gonna need someone to explain it. And then when he figures he's gonna cost him money, he's not gonna be real happy about it, I don't think. As well as individuals and homes, it's like. And interesting enough, I look back over the last 3 years, my assessed value of my home has gone up every year, every year. It's like this was already in plan, but you look back and you see the plan now. In Wayne Township specifically, all the increase in the assessed value. We thought we had it made. It's great to have the assessed value, but gosh, I wish now I didn't have that assessed value, on that one hand.
I think a complexity and so Representative Thompson, Chairman Thompson spoke to this being a multi-year, multi-session fix to property tax. And I think he had proposed a great deal of this when Doc Brown was the chair but Doc Brown didn't want to hear any of Representative Thompson's feedback at that time, or didn't want to take the totality of it. And so now that Chairman Thompson is the chair of the House Ways and Means, he's able to do a few more things with the formulas and the long range plan that he has. But he's talked about a 12-year plan. What I don't know is if he got through more this session than he expected to, because he stripped Senate Old Act 1 when it came over to the House, and that's when he put all of his language in. He did not call his own bill. He waited until Senate Bill 1 came over and then put his language in at that point. One of the challenges of what he'd like to see is when a school district hypothetically increases the rate, the taxpayer sees their taxes go up.
Right.
When a school district decreases the rate, the taxpayer will see their taxes go down. But then we have this pesky little thing called the circuit breaker. And many of us are already impacted with the circuit breaker. So you somehow have to adjust for the constitutional amendment made for the circuit breaker, because nobody's going to vote twice to get that out. And somehow work on this rate that falls below the circuit breaker by reducing and dropping 33% AB isn't going to get us there. Not in Wayne Township or Beech Grove or Mount Vernon or a lot of the schools that are hardest hit. So I don't know how we get there with circuit breaker in place, which is already part of our Constitution, to what he truly is wanting to see happen, ideally. or idealistically with the way property taxes are paid. Time will tell. Time will tell. But there's some competing factors here that, are gonna make this really, really challenging, if even possible at all. Thank you, Jane.
Thank
you so much.
See why we wanted good news before.
Well, this, we've talked about Senate Enrolled Act One Commission, an efficiency commission involving our stakeholders. Because we will again share this information with them, and we talked to CTA about being here to also hear this information, because it's gonna be important as we move forward and look at the future operations and expenditures within the school district, that we understand the reduced revenue that will be coming in, and also to understand the impact of the referendum in 2026 when it passes or doesn't pass, what that might look like. So we're looking at that $20 million figure that Jane showed long term. Then that's the kind of the figure that you need to look at. If this doesn't pass, what are those $20 million reductions beyond the 15 that we'll have in the first round for that commission? And so that will also help with the campaign to be able to say, here's what this referendum will be going towards. Okay? These are the things, because that's always an important factor when somebody says, okay, what's my money going towards in this, if I vote yes for this referendum. So that's what we're hoping to accomplish with the commission coming up. Hopefully I'll have a little bit more information for the working session here in a couple of weeks to be able to lay out. Still working on some nuances of that, but would like to have that work done before the end of December, so we at least have a plan for me.
Thank you very much. Moving on to board information and comments.
Well, we are 2 weeks from having our students back for the 25-26 school year. It is fast approaching upon us. Just a reminder, and should have on your calendar our new teacher breakfast, which will occur next Friday, a week from this Friday on the 25th. Breakfast starts at 8 o'clock. Correct, pictures at 7:30, breakfast at 8. So hope that everybody can make it for the breakfast on the 25th. Do we know how many new staff we have yet at this point?
Approximately.
Okay, so right around 100. I think we'll be excited to see all of those folks here. And then we have on the 28th, our opening day. That will begin at 8 o'clock. You will have reserved seating. Should have received an invitation a couple of weeks ago, probably from Mrs. Brown. So we wear your favorite purple shirts or favorite purple whatever. We did not buy anything special for this one. There will not be singing and dancing, but there might be something just a little bit special. See, we're working on something. See how it comes out. So, and then of course, the students return on Wednesday the 30th. So we're excited to have them back in our buildings. Projects are coming along really well. As you drive by buildings, some of them may be looking not ready, but they will be. They will be. We always, and then if you're so inclined, the Gateway Gallop supporting the B&O Trail is the 2nd of August. That's the week from this Saturday. 2 weeks from this Saturday. Will be at Ben Davis. Might be the last time at Ben Davis, because the trail will be open for the 2026 Gateway Gallop. So we do have executive session scheduled for the working session on the 28th. That will be for our new preschool principal, to be the new preschool principal. So we will have a little bit, sometimes this time of year, we do have a little bit of board action at a working session. We will on the 28th, because we will need to hire that person so that they can actually be ready for our kids on Wednesday. So that's all I have, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Board, any additional comment or discussion this evening? We will adjourn at 8:04, and let's shoot to be back in the Ben Davis conference room by 8:15, a 10-minute recess. You.